So at this point, I think most of us have played Mario Wonder. It's an amazing game with absolutely amazing visuals and mechanics. The gameplay elements are interesting and it doesn't feel stale. I especially like the badges. Despite all the amazing things about it, there is one problem that I have with the game. The bosses are severely lacking. That's not to say that they're not good, but I think that they can be improved. Pretty much all of the bosses are Bowser Jr., except for the final boss, and some worlds don't even have bosses. In this video, I'm going to go over my ideas on how they could have improved the bosses or implemented different bosses to spice up the game. So before I get into my ideas, I want to briefly go over the bosses that are in the game, and why a lot of people have complaints about them. So like I said in the beginning, most of the bosses are Bowser Jr. In fact, 4 out of the 5 bosses in the game are Bowser Jr. The final boss is good and received mostly praise, so for the sake of the video, I'm mainly going to be focusing on the Bowser Jr. fights. Even though you only fight Bowser Jr. for most of the boss fights, that's not to say that they're not unique. Each fight has a unique gimmick due to the Wonder Flowers, and that makes the fights interesting. But at the same time, the gimmicks aren't too special when you look back at the previous fights in the games. I'm not trying to detract from the original bosses, but I just think they could have been more exciting if that makes sense. Even if they wanted to keep all the bosses as Bowser Jr., I think they could have done that more smoothly if they included more bosses. For instance, in multiple Mario games, there are bosses in the middle of each world in addition to the end of the world. Like I said earlier, some worlds don't even have bosses, so I think that if the developers added more bosses, it would have been better. I understand why the developers didn't though, because the game is amazing in pretty much every other aspect. So the first and one of the most obvious things they could have added to make the bosses more interesting is by implementing the Koopa Links. The Koopa Links are staple bosses who are in nearly every 2D Mario game. They are staple characters, and if you ask any Mario fan to name iconic bosses, they will most likely say the Koopa Links, right after Bowser and Bowser Jr. of course. Each of the Koopa Links have different abilities and movesets throughout each game they are in. I feel like if the Koopa Links were in Mario Wonder, they would make the bosses more interesting and exciting. I would have especially liked to see the Koopa Links in the style of Mario Wonder. I know Boom Boom isn't technically a Koopa Link, but I also want to talk about him in this section briefly, because I don't think I can dedicate a whole section to him. Boom Boom is a boss from the past games who would act as kind of a boss before the boss, if that makes sense. He was usually the first boss for a world, and the player would usually fight him in the middle of each world. This was great because even though the developers reused Boom Boom, they had other bosses throughout the game. To wrap up this section, I think the Koopa Links would have been a great inclusion, but then again, the Koopa Links have been in so many games, so I think it would have been cool to see some original bosses. In Mario Wonder, one of the main gameplay elements are the Wonder Flowers. In the game, the Wonder Flowers are used to add a unique gimmick to each level, and while they did utilize the Wonder Flowers in the Bowser Jr. boss fights, I wish they used the Wonder Flowers to turn normal enemies into major bosses. Kinda like that one level where the Hoppy Cats turned huge due to the Wonder Flower. They did a similar type of thing in Yoshi's Woolly World. In those games, Kamek used his magic to enhance regular enemies and turned them into fun, unique, and memorable bosses. For instance, there was a boss in Yoshi's Woolly World who was pretty much just a giant Monty Mole. Now, ordinary Monty Moles are easy enemies to deal with, and not much thought goes into attacking them. But in the boss fight, they expanded on the mechanics that the Monty Moles had and turned it into a unique boss fight. I think they could have done something like this in Mario Wonder, even if it was as basic as making the enemies bigger. And I know some of you guys are thinking that in Mario Wonder, there is a boss fight where Bowser Jr. turns big, but I'm just thinking about normal enemies. Another example is how they turned a Paratroopa into a boss by simply making it bigger. And just this one change led to a couple different boss fights with wildly different mechanics and arenas. If they went with this approach, I would have loved to fight a giant Mama. Another enemy I would have liked to see become a boss is the Mumsy. I think they could have used the unraveling mechanic really interestingly in a potential boss fight. Anyways, let's move on to the next section. There have been many bosses from the past Mario games that haven't had much attention. One of these bosses is King Wart. Even when the first trailer came out, some people were speculating that he was going to be the main villain of Mario Wonder. King Wart was from Mario Bros. 2, and has been one of his only appearances since. Many people thought he'd be the main villain of Mario Wonder because of the Wonder Flowers and how they work. For those of you who don't know, King Wart's goal was to conquer the Land of Dreams, and the Wonder Seeds do many things that resemble the type of stuff you'd see in dreams. I mean, there's literally a Wonder Seed that turns you into a giant spike ball. If that doesn't sound like something from a dream, then I don't know what does. But even though I was pretty sure it wouldn't happen, I still think it would have been interesting if they brought King Wart back. Another boss they could have brought back is King Babam. Now, I don't think he would have been one of the main bosses, but I think it could have been interesting if he was a side boss, kind of like how Boom Boom was in the past games. Same thing for King Thwomp. There's also a character who was in Mario Wonder, but wasn't a boss. This character was Kamek. In the past games, he's been a pretty consistent boss, and he was usually fought towards the end of the games. Kamek was in Mario Wonder, but he didn't really do much. I think it could have been awesome to fight Kamek in Mario Wonder. I mean, maybe they could have had his fight mix the Wonder Flowers and his magic. This next boss wouldn't have been at the top of my list for bosses to bring back, but I figure I might as well talk about him. Dry Bowser could have been an interesting boss. He was an undead version of Bowser from the past games, but if I'm being honest, I'm pretty happy with the final Bowser fight in Mario Wonder, so I don't think they need to change it. It still could have been cool to see Dry Bowser in the special world or something though. I want to say that the bosses in Mario Wonder are awesome and pretty fun, and I didn't make this video just to complain. I just thought it'd be interesting if they added other bosses and wanted to talk about it. Also, I know a lot of you guys enjoyed the How Useful Would Power-Ups Be in Real Life series, and I'm definitely going to make a part 3. I can't guarantee when, but I just know that it'll come out sometime in the future, and hopefully within my next couple of videos. I really appreciate the support and encouragement that you guys have shown, and I'm really grateful for you guys. Also, I'm curious to know if you guys have any other ideas for hypothetical bosses in Mario Wonder. Are there bosses that you wanted to be added? Are you happy with the current bosses? Let me know in the comments. If you don't mind subscribing, that would really help. Thank you, and I hope you have a great day.